Why don't we start with the obvious, and that's the diplomatic track that Steve Witkoff and others are on. The president seems to be dispatching different voices here. Kushner and Witkoff, you go to one. Secretary of State Rubio, you go to the other. At some point, we need everybody at the same table, don't we?
We do, but this is how modern peace negotiations work. So despite some of the strangeness that surrounds this, despite that it's a very tight personalistic network that the president is using to negotiate, which is different than standard diplomatic practice, at least in the United States, everything you're seeing playing out is actually not that uncommon in some senses. So if you look at the actual statistics of how peace negotiations and wars end, sadly, in the modern world, wars either peter out or you come to an uneasy ceasefire that fails. So only 31% of conflicts end in some type of negotiated settlement. And even of those, 40%, even during negotiations, relapse into conflict within 5 years. So I think that's why you've accurately seen Secretary Rubio characterize this phase as the start of a negotiation. He called it, I think, a living document.
That's right.
And so that's why you have everyone going out, trusted person-to-person conversations. And we're trying to work out, we've gone from 28, the U.S. initial kind of Witkoff deal, I guess we can call it, down to 24, the European. Now we're down to a 19-point proposal. And so what you're seeing is each side engage in a bargaining activity that allows them to look at where the most intractable issues are, what's mutually acceptable, although painful to both sides. So I'm still mildly optimistic, but I think the best case is that this all results in a ceasefire, and I'd rate that as less than even chances.
Fascinating. I've never heard those stats before. That's fascinating for the backdrop to these talks. There's a lot that Ukraine has to potentially lose here. What would Russia be giving up in the plans that you've heard about?
Well, I'm curious about that too, and apparently only Special Envoy Witkoff knows that, and it doesn't look like a lot. So we've actually been studying this pretty in depth at the Futures Lab for a year. So about a year ago, I traveled to Ukraine about every 6 months to try to do my best to help out with that side of the conflict, not the Russian side. And what I noticed in that process is I had a sense the war is coming to a critical point, and you're going to have to end at some point. No war can last forever. This has been brutal for Ukrainian society. These are people fighting for their freedom against all odds. And so we started to write over the last year of what would the negotiations look like. In fact, we actually surveyed experts. We scraped prominent news sources. And then we actually trained using an API into ChatGPT 4.0. We actually ran 1,000 different simulations of different peace negotiations to use kind of modern technology to analyze the distribution. And so your viewers can check that out at Strategic Headwinds, but that's a lot of our research on this is shown.
That's all public.
That's all public.
That's
we built this because we want Ukrainian negotiators, European negotiators, American negotiators, first and foremost, to have access to objective, nonpartisan data they can use to help find a negotiation. What do you find in that? Number one, good news about the Macron meeting, because whenever we look at human experts or the AI model replicating them, security guarantees are the most important thing. So the 28-point plan was dead on arrival because it didn't really have anything for credible security guarantees. It kind of threatened diplomatic démarches and some economic punishment. So security guarantees are by far the most important thing. Where we saw humans and AI diverge is what comes next. And so humans seem to think there's really a room for freeing up these Russian frozen assets, giving it back to Moscow, reducing sanctions, so kind of using economics to induce Moscow in. When we ran the AI simulations, and that included loading over 300 past peace agreements in, they were less optimistic about the economic component. Now, I still personally think economic statecraft is the fulcrum here. That's the only way you can get Russia to agree. And I think the good news, if there is any, out of the Witkoff trips, is that he seems to have the right people in Russia talking about some type of investment scheme. The bad news is that doesn't seem to direct the money to rebuild Ukraine that Russia has spent years now destroying.
I'm blown away by this. Did you know, James, we were going to get into this? So AI is the platform, though. Economic diplomacy might be the fulcrum, but AI is the platform that you're talking about to find peace. Is this the future of war and peace?
Well, we think so. I mean, in my lab, we believe that AI agents can help humans digest larger volumes of information. So you still need expert human users. And I'm sure your audience in Bloomberg has been using technology like this for a long time, right? It's still a trader's intuition, but the more data they can analyze, the more they can apply statistical reasoning to it, the more they can find past patterns, look for those strange signals, the more likely they are to seize an opportunity. So what we've done is use use that initial analytics to then look at where we needed to go deep. And that's why most of the pieces your viewers will find on there deal with the details of security guarantees and then some of the economic aspects. Now, one of the most important things to highlight, and that all parties agree, is that even if it seems like this deal comes to an end, it doesn't. That 40% relapsing in 5 years is really important. And one of the major things to really watch for is usually the reason it relapses is because each political party has a backlash, a spoiler domestically. So Zelenskiy, if that line is drawn wrong, and in the middle of a corruption scandal, Zelensky's all of a sudden voted or chased out of office, and you have hardline factions come up in Ukraine. I'd love to see Putin replaced, but we ought to really think what comes after Putin, and if even Russia would stay a actual sovereign state or dissolve into a series of regions. So one of the things you have to watch for carefully as you spread this out, and this is why it's important to build that RAG model with AI to analyze historic peace agreements, is that domestic political spoiler, how domestic politics matter when you're ending an international war.
This has been a real eye-opener for me. Before you leave us, with all of that said, do you expect this week to bring a breakthrough, or are we way over our skis on this?
I hope and pray are different than reasoned estimates. And so I would say I think Secretary Rubio is right. This is a living document. I think Putin is going to prolong this as much as possible, and he's still going to try to bomb Ukraine into submission. Our firepower strike data showed that the month of October saw a threefold increase over 1 year. So October 2024 versus 2025, 3 times as many Shaheeds, ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles were used to target Ukrainian cities with a special focus on power infrastructure. He wants the Ukrainian people to freeze while he protracts negotiations so that he can get more territory and get more of that oligarch loot back in his pocket and not investing in a dynamic Ukrainian free economy.